You know what? It's that time again. Time to fix another Gloomhaven class. Guess who's up? The Quartermaster. So the Quartermaster's had a long history of a big reputation, especially on like Board Game Geek and Reddit, of being one of the most busted classes. Now it's up there with the big three, but it's one of those things where there's a lot of nuance that goes into making it busted, whereas say like Eclipse is incredibly obvious as to why it is. Sometimes Three Spears players kind of have to figure it out, and after you've had some discussion, you can find some stuff like, you know, obviously the infinite stamina combo, and there's much more. So there's going to be a little bit of a nuanced approach to fixing the Quartermaster. I also want to thank my patrons for picking this out on my Patreon poll. Look at this. So if you want to vote on what class we're fixing next, go ahead and join Patreon and you can help decide what we're going to fix next. Something that's interesting before we delve into the Quartermaster, if you port the Quartermaster into Frosthaven, it actually becomes significantly less powerful than it would be in Gloomhaven, because there's some fixes that we've made in general to improve some of the classes in general and their item interaction that the Quartermaster naturally takes a hit in the process. That doesn't necessarily mean that items are weak in Frosthaven. There's actually really cool and much more neat options. I personally think the potions, the potion in alchemy is so much better in Frosthaven. It's more fun, and there's a lot more variety of potions than just the handful we get in Gloomhaven. So why, despite the fact that we have this myriad of new items, is the Quartermaster weaker? In general, because the consumed items have a little bit, some of the more busted ones are rotated out, or they're pushed to higher prosperity, and of course the nerf and stamina potions. So with that in mind, we're going to bring over, as part of the Quartermaster fix, a lot of fixes from Frosthaven, including, for example here, the change to the minor stamina potion that you can see in Frosthaven. We're going to make this fix across the board. Now, we're not going to apply necessarily all these fixes, but anything Scroll of Stamina, Major Stamina Potion, Star Pendant, and even other broken items like Pendant of Dark Pacts, let's just add Unrecoverable to, and then add some of the other text that just says, hey, if you're going to be recovering items, we're going to restrict it, instead of just, you know, Stamina Potions have had 2 nerfs. So we've had, first off, the nerf from 2 to 1, and now we have the nerf from any card to only level 1 cards now. However, this causes a bit of a problem because the Quartermaster was designed to have some ability to exploit some stamina problems. That's why he has such a small hand size, and he actually has plenty of losses. So if you were to redesign the Quartermaster, you'd probably have to redesign, first off, his hand size and the amount of losses he has. If you just completely take off his ability to use some of his small item restoration to be able to increase his stamina. Because right now, if you take a look, he actually has infinite stamina if you want to play him that way, and actually infinite experience. So as part of this fix, first off, we're going to get rid of infinite stamina, because it doesn't matter what scenario, we shouldn't actually have anyone be able to make infinite anything. As a matter of fact, when we were doing Frosthaven playtesting, we kind of made it a point of emphasis. If there is an infinite combo, bring it up so we can squash it. So as part of this fix, we're going to be doing the same thing. So with that in mind, take a look. We have the new Quartermaster's hand size of 10. Now, one of the big things is with less losses and a bigger hand size, the Quartermaster is now going to be a little bit... We're going to tune down some of his cards, because some of the cards were, for a lot of the 9-hand classes, some of their non-loss cards were designed to be a little bit ahead of the curve. So we're going to tune down a few cards, and we're going to change some of them, especially some that weren't useful, and we're clearly going to nerf some of the more overpowered cards like Reinforced Steel, which who knows why that would even existed in the first place. However, in the process of increasing the hand size from 9 to 10, you have to throw in a new card. So here it is. Blacksmiths Edge Attack 3 also includes you may refresh a spent, not consumed, 1- or 2-handed item. So that means if you're using cool stuff like, you know, the Jagged Sword or the Iron Spear, or any number of the cool weapons that you have available, you're now able to perform the attack and then refresh it back. So you could potentially have multiple like spear attacks per rest, which can really improve your damage output if you're attacking with extra hexes, especially if you're using it on bigger attacks. The bottom hand, on the other hand, gives you a nice move 3, which isn't terrible, but also allows you to refresh one of your chest pieces. Now, this isn't consumed, so you can't use this to get back your invisibility cloak, but if you're wearing, you know, chainmail or one of the other equivalent armors, you can get it back and get some of your shield charges. Especially if you're relying more on short rests, you're now able to get back some of your armor and be able to stay in the fight without relying on long rests to get it back. So here we see Crippling Bow. So a lot of what I wanted to do is have more item interaction between what you bring and be able to convert an item like, hey, this item isn't super useful in this scenario, but being able to use it to soup up other cards. And even then, you still have the capacity to refresh consumed or spent items anyway. So even if you wanted to use it for this cool effect, you'll be able to get it back through your other cards, which I'm not changing most of them actually. So Crippling Bow here, we're getting rid of the 1 experience and saying that you can consume a 1 or 2-handed item when using this weapon to give it Pierce 3, making it much better and giving your 1 experience. So it's now worse if you don't use an item, and it's now notably better. Attack 3, Pierce 3, Range 3 is ahead of the curve for a level 1. However, it does cost you to consume an item in the process, something you can get back, but usually with a top action. So allows you to kind of dump it forward a little bit so that you can during downtime, you might be able to refresh that item. So you can play a little bit more tactically that way. Or you can say, you know what, I just need a regular attack 3, range 3, and you don't get the experience. But we're trying to motivate item use. Crushing Hammer, we didn't change the bottom or the initiative, but one of the things is we're trying to make the Quartermaster have less losses. So right here, and we're also adding more item interaction, but we wanted to keep the core of the card about the same. We don't want to add so many non-loss stuns, because one of the problems is you'll quickly find in Gloomhaven, especially as you move to Frosthaven, there's significantly less like non-loss hard crowd control abilities just in general, or they're a little bit more conditional, like the Banner Spear's ability to disarm, which first off you get experience and disarm on attack 3, which is great. Unfortunately, you need to have the enemy and an ally in the right position to be able to do that. However, we didn't want to give too many free stuns away, so removing the loss symbol now requires you to consume a 1-handed or 2-handed item in order to stun the enemy and gain 1 experience. Now, I personally think this is very reminiscent of the Warhammer, but in this case, you're only stunning 1 enemy. But you can, like, if you brought a heater shield and you're like, I'm not going to need this, just consume the heater shield to add a stun. It might actually end up being better in the long run. Ironbulwark, we've changed it slightly. No longer gives you an experience, but it still is an attack 3 with muddle, which is still pretty solid. However, if you have an item that's spent with the word shield in its name, you can just immediately refresh it. So if you have a heater shield or, you know, a tower shield or any of those, spike shield, any of those fun things, you can potentially use this attack, get it back, allowing you to give yourself a little bit more item interaction. There's a little bit more shields in the game that gives us a little bit, it's a little bit specific, but the card was already pretty decent as is, so it's not one of those that we wanted to change too much, but I wanted to incentivize doing this. And it's one of those where a lot of people that are playing more tanky builds end up running this anyway, because often you're going to be using the shield, preventing the damage, getting the experience, muddling the enemy, and being able to play a low-level Quartermaster more effectively. Restock's a small change. It was already a little bit pretty good of a card, but going from a 9 to 10 class, you're going to want to keep this bottom attack in more in line with, like, you know, the Brute's Spare Dagger, so we're just changing it to an attack 2. And that's all the changes we're doing to level 1. Ultimately, the item changes means the low-level Quartermaster actually wasn't super terribly broken, but all of these allow it to be a little bit more interactive and gives it a little bit more direction. If you want to go more being able to do damage, refresh items, or being able to be a little bit more tanky, you've got some options now. But as we go to higher levels, level 2 already has pretty good options. Level 3, it starts to get a little strange, and of course, level 5 and higher have some very broken options. So first, let's go to level 3, and there's the very obvious Scroll of Lightning. Right now, I think the very easy fix is to just reduce it to attack 4. Now you could say like, hey, why don't you add some item interaction on this? But ultimately, a lot of people, by the time they're this level and they're unlocked the class, they already probably are dumping some sort of item into it. We really just want to nerf this card because it's just way too ahead of the curve. Not only that, but you have the immediate level Giant Club, the next level, which is kind of a downgrade when you think about it compared to Scroll of Lightning, because you have to be in melee. So we're just going to turn this into an attack 4, and it makes the club a little bit more exciting. Also, not only that, but it's a 10 card class, and this is actually beating out some of the Spellweavers, like Engulfed in Flames. Anyway, it should be a little bit more in line now, but these both Scroll of Lightning right now is still a strong pick, even with this nerf. Continual Supply wasn't necessarily a bad pick. It's a pretty strong card, but it did complete with Scroll of Lightning, so it often got overshadowed. And one of the problems is the top part ends up being pretty neat for those Johnny players that really want to exploit the ability to just be able to discard cards and be able to consume. Like, literally, all costs you is to discard one card to give an ally a potion back, which is huge, actually. To lose a card and then force yourself to discard cards, you're probably going to be a little bit of a problem. But if you're actually using Reforge, it's not actually that big of a deal, because the amount of utility this does bring, if you're using like the shopkeep thing, ends up being pretty strong as is. And we've never really had any huge problems with the top part. The bottom part's making it a double loss. It's not a very inventive bottom. It's just like, hey, get 2 lost cards back. Not only that, but that makes the whole thing unrecoverable. So we're just going to wipe that whole out. So now this card is recoverable by lost cards, if that's even important enough. We're adding a nice move 4 on it that allows you to refresh a spent item on an adjacent ally. So not only does it give it a nice little, you have a conditional top that you may or may not want to use, but you have a non-conditional bottom that you certainly will probably get some use out of. At the very least, a move 4 is never a bad pick. And now Reinforced Steel. So this is probably the biggest nerf that I've done out of everything. I know that actually probably the Stamina Potion nerf is, but let's take a look at this. So the bottom, first off, the bottom is just broken. And a Shield 2 Aura is already incredible, but a Shield 2 Aura non-loss on an Initiative 12 is just straight busted. So nerfing it to a Shield 1 felt inappropriate, because I really wanted to keep the tank Quartermaster intact, so it just got rid of the Aura. So now it's still an Initiative 12. Initiative 12 Shield 2 Self is incredibly strong. It allows you to beat most of the quick initiatives, and being able to Shield 2 yourself that round and be kind of like that, you know, just big phalanx standing in front. So if you want it to be the tank, you've got that. The top half we kept intact, but worse and better. First off, it'll actually help your stamina, because you can actually recover it, because it only lasts for 3 turns. But it does exactly what it did before, but instead of 2 experience, you get 1. And instead of every turn forever, it only lasts for the next 3 turns. But the big thing is, instead of losing it after you've recovered 3 spent items, you discard it. So then you can recover it and then keep going. Now, of course, this does mean you're going to have to lose top half actions to keep putting it into play. However, the ability to say, hey, I'm going to put this into play, then my next 3 turns I'm going to keep on spear, 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 goggles, goggles, goggles. No matter what, you're going to be recovering 3 items. And because it's over 3 turns, it allows you to exploit your favorite item multiple times if that's the way you want to play. And ultimately, that's kind of what Reinforced Steel ended up doing. Most of the people are like, I'm going to Eagle Eye to death. And it's still going to be a really good card. Refreshment. This is one of those cards that didn't see a lot of play because it's a double loss and it's kind of hard to use. You either are... The bottom half isn't necessarily bad, but it's bad on a 9-card class. Bumping it up to a 10-card class, it's a little bit more useful though, because your actions are not as strong and you now have the stamina to be able to help an ally out. The top half, on the other hand, feels weaker than some of its other equivalents. So instead of that, we're actually making it a super powerful version of your level 1 cards. So refresh 2 of your consumed items, small items specifically. Now, this might sound a little powerful, but it is level 7. And you no longer can recover some of those really busted ones. Like, I don't know, the Star Earring really comes to mind, but also not being able to get back stamina potions. Just being able to, like, lose a turn to get back a power potion and something else really reduces its potency to get 2 cards back. And kind of keeps it up with some of the early cards to give a higher level equivalent. Now, of course, you have cards like, you know, Bag of Holding at level 9 that give you everything back and everything allies next to you, but to only get 2 back at the cost of a top action is I still think it's strong, and it is, but it's not nearly as strong. And Bag of Holding also got a nerf from adding those items to those, but you can still recover cards like Ring of Brutality and Ring of Haste, which are still incredibly powerful. And lastly, we're changing Portable Ballista because yeah, this card's pretty busted. I wanted to make the bottom part, but like in general, like if you change this to what, all of your attacks at Pierce 3, it's not going to be a gigantic difference from what you were already doing. But I just decided to leave it that way because it is a level 8 bottom that doesn't do anything except for Pierce Infinite. But the top half, all those attack 4s is just so powerful. So we brought it down to attack 3 just to keep it a little bit more in line for non-loss equivalents for its level. And that's all we're doing with the cards. The level 9 cards obviously could have had some change because they're both pretty busted, but let's be real, there's so many level 9 cards that are just completely broken. Bag of Holding is probably, it's by adding the non-recoverable symbol to those cards, kind of keeps it a little bit less broken than it was. And I mean, honestly, disarming every. So the last thing we're doing is we're going to redo the perks. And of course, we're going to keep this in line for the Frosthaven perks. That includes 18 perk options and including 3 non-attack modifier perks. And I like some of the changes. So one of the things that I really liked when Gripeway and Themris redid the perks is less of the like remove 4+ zeros and add more of like replace some of your plus zeros with rolling modifiers or replace plus zeros with better. In this case, the Quartermaster has lots of rolling modifiers, which with the Frosthaven rules ends up being actually really advantageous because you have very easy ways to get advantage. Basically, Eagle Eye Goggles, but you have the ability to get it back very quickly. So we got rid of the remove 4+ zeros and replaced it with the ability to remove zeros and replace them with rolling modifiers. So we left in the replace plus zeros with +2s, and we left in the remove -1s. Figured they're pretty fine as is. So now you have the ability to remove up to 2 +0 cards and replace them with 2 rolling +1s each, which is huge. When you take 1 +0 out, your deck becomes a little bit more reliable. So if you've actually improved the deck to add more +2s or remove less -1s, removing +0s actually skews it towards the positive. But then also replacing it with rolling +1s just makes your damage output that much better. So boom, remove +0s and add 2 +1s per +0 removed. Fantastic. And also you can remove 2 +0s with 1 perk, which is great, and then replace them with Rolling Pierces. Now the Rolling Pierce is like one of the weakest ones you can do, but when you can remove 2 +0s and then add Rolling Pierces with it, that makes it much more desirable. It's a much more powerful perk than before, and it literally has half the power of what was already considered a powerful perk to begin with, so it should balance it out a little bit better. I didn't change the rolling stun or the rolling target ones because those were generally fine as is. I didn't want it to replace stuff because adding a rolling stun is already pretty good. And I did remove one of the +1s from the ignore the penalties from wearing armor that gives you -1s. So you can now wear heavy armor, but you only get 1 +1 instead of 2 +1s. Note that some people might consider this a bonus because it does mean that your get +0 and refresh and consumed item actually gets more common. So in some ways it's a buff in the process. So one thing with Frosthaven design that's pretty important is I wanted to design this with Frosthaven in mind. There's a new condition that allows you to, until you're healed, you are no longer able to use items. That makes the Quartermaster awful. So and you're not supposed to necessarily take all the perks. You can't actually take 18 perks, so you take your favorite. So we added one here that makes you immune to, you know, that injury. That's important, especially if you port this into Frosthaven. So if you were using, you know, the old monsters bringing through Gloomhaven, this perk can be ignored, but likely you're going to be ignoring some perks anyway, but so this is a gimme. However, if you are playing in Frosthaven, playing against those pesky lurkers, especially if you're doing 4-player where there's more elites, you'll be getting hit with this a lot, making your Quartermaster useless. So this felt like a mandatory perk. Also, if you saw that now, with the cost of 1 perk, you can start equipping more one-handed items. This works really well with the ability to, you have more capacity to perform actions and refresh spent items with this build. So, and you have a little bit more stamina from going to 9 to 10, obviously you have less, but you'll be able to actually play one more cycle of rest before forcing yourself to rest without using a stamina potion. So adding more items means that your attacks will have more nifty stuff if you actually want to go that route. Last but not least, we added a 2-point perk that says every time you long rest, refresh an item card. Now, that's refresh an item card. So it can refresh a spent one, which you're already going to be doing, but more importantly, refresh a consumed one. So if you're like, crap, I want to get my power potion back, you can long rest and just get it back. Now you're like, I want my Cloak of Invisibility back. Long rest, get it back. This gives a lot of power to give you one important item back without actually having to play a card. All you have to do is long rest, which is something you might be naturally considering anyway. So this gives a little bit more power to people that want to do that build. Now, you can still course short rest, and then you don't have to take this perk because short resting is still powerful, especially with the new Quartermaster who has a higher hand size, means that you're more aligned with like the brute. And since you have a few less loss actions, you're probably going to be doing that less often, but you still have access to Reforge, allowing you to recover cards, increasing your hand size every rest cycle at the cost of losing one bottom action. And that's it. That's the Quartermaster. So what are your thoughts on it? I'd love to see more people have responses on like, hey, try it out. So if you want to try it out, I'm including the card files in the description in the video. So let me know if you're interested in playing it. But even if you aren't, let me know what your thoughts on this and maybe other classes you'd like to see redone. So again, a special thanks to our patrons for picking this out. You guys are awesome. I'm going to be doing a few more of this Alice Thoughts videos where I'm going to be going over some core concepts of the game and just generally weighing in on some of the changes and evolutions of the game, especially from Gloomhaven to Frosthaven, and including some things on like meta commentary. So thanks to all of you for contributing to some of those ideas, and thanks to all of you for watching. I'll see you next time.